didn't understand. I understood this, but never understood this in lieu of this in lieu of this. I never understood all three. I never saw that before. I never saw all three. I would see maybe this and then maybe that, but separate from. I never saw this. And so now I see this. That's just part of the equation. Then I never saw this. And now that I see this, then I can see this. And then the word charge. Everything builds on each other. By the way, that's what technology is. Technology is nothing more than building on someone else's successes and making another advancement. Spiritual truth is very similar to that. It's taking truth that God's already given you and building on it. Which is why today, if you were to go back in time and tell somebody about that a cell phone has on it all the things that we basically have a mobile computer in our pockets, they would think you're crazy. That a phone no longer is used as a phone. It's like less than 20% of what it's used for is the voice audible phone calls. 80% of the use of the iPhone or other smartphones is used for internet, texting, and other things. It's only a small percentage of the time used for the actual intent that it's called a phone. It's not even used for that. If you would tell somebody long ago that was going to happen, they'd go, "You're out of your mind." But what happened? We stacked up on technology advancements and we kept on advancing so that the current reality looks like it dwarfs the previous reality. Doesn't mean the other person's stupid. Doesn't mean that. Just means they didn't know what they didn't know. But they did benefit because they did give forth a premise that God gifted them to see something that others then built and continued on that. Same in spiritual truth. God put the A.E. Wilsons out there, the Govets, the Pembers, the Langs, the Larkins, to build and build and build. We are where we are, not because we got it on our own. We got here from the knowledge of God's putting that out there. He continued to build and shift and change that. Yes?
Laney said God hadn't given it to you yet.
Yeah. So God just continues to unveil and continue to push forward. So as we see this now in verse 25, when he says, return back to the land. So this right here, this is your 7 weeks. Because here is your 7 weeks where they turned back. You go, what? I don't understand what you're saying by that. Well, this is where they turned back, because this was in July of 586 BC till October 538 BC. And that, which you can see, would be where they turn back. That's your 70 weeks, which that, if you take this conversion, that's 49 years, but it has to be converted, which is that times 360, would then equal 17,640, which then divided by 365.25 equal 48, which coincidentally is what this is. So that's 48 years right there. There's your 48 years. There's your 48 years, which equals the 7 weeks fulfilled. So Daniel just saw this happen. Daniel's like, say what? Why are you telling me this now? He said, well, I told you that one of the things is I'm going to finish the rebellion of transgressions. Well, it's not totally done until 517 of the 70 years. But I'm going to tell you the precursor of it is when Zerubbabel goes back and makes the foundation. It was the same year that the chest of silver, which is Cyrus and Darius, he comes in. Well, that's the turning back. You begin to turn back in 528. That's the first time you get to go back to Jerusalem. That's the first sign of God's first domino of His promises. So the 7 weeks is right here. This is earmarked by Zerubbabel as the first sign of a promise.
And remember, 1,000 years before that, 1538 was Moses.
Yeah. Yeah. So Zerubbabel was the first sign that promises would be fulfilled. So he didn't live to see it. Daniel, he didn't need to. If God tells you that A, B, and C, and D is going to happen, and you're waiting for him to introduce the alphabet, and all of a sudden, before you die, you hear him go, A. You're excited. That means B, C, and D. It's a matter of time, baby, because you just started saying the first thing. So once you do this, it's a matter of time now. I got you. But then that's only for this piece of this part. Then there's the future part also, which is, so here and here are dealing with Israel, past tense or future tense right here, which is real, I should say present tense. He saw this. This deals with expanding. Here he says the expanding, but this is actually the 62 weeks here. Both of these are the 62 weeks. So, but in expanding, here's what's interesting about the expansion. In the expanding, or the walls, you have, this was in 445 BC, and Nehemiah building. But he also goes on later on and talks even more about that, because he says later on that this building, he tells you later on in the chapter 9, he says later on it's building in times of distress. We read that in verse 25 at the end. And he says, and there will be, unto the Messiah, there'll be 762 weeks. The streets shall be built again and rebuilt, and the walls, even in troublous times, or in times of distress. So in times of distress, Nehemiah, which Babe is reading about this recently, she jested with me going, this Nehemiah guy has a lot in common with what's going on in our country now. People are giving guff about building the wall. Well, the difference is they both have the same premise of those that are against the wall. They both have the same premise of being against what is basically an intrinsically right thing to do, not done in hate. But the difference of people of the Bible is that, yeah, Jerusalem always had a wall. We didn't have a wall before around our country, but they always had a wall. So they're building back what they knew for a fact was God's original intent, whereas now that wasn't our case in our country. But similar interesting thoughts about how he got a lot of guff, Nehemiah did, about building a wall, because people didn't want to build it. And I remember the old joke about Nehemiah was the guy named, was it Onan? He said, "Oh no" to Onan, and he said, "Go here and listen to me." And he wanted to basically sway him away from building the wall. One of the many people against him. So Nehemiah building a wall here. But then you also had, in 18 BC, you also had King Herod expanding the walls of Jerusalem. And they both were done in a time of great distress. When Rome was taking over Jerusalem, there was a lot of distress and a lot of tumult. When Nehemiah was trying to build the wall, there was a lot of stress and a lot of tumult. Some of the Jews wanted the temple rebuilt in Nehemiah's day, and some didn't. As we saw, don't believe me, read the book. Read all chapter Nehemiah, chapter 2 onward, the rest of the book. You'll see he didn't like it. He goes back and he starts pulling his beard out. He's so angry because of how they're living their lives, holding each other into, like, charging interest on debt that's owed, treating their fellow brothers like regular worldly people. And he's like, what, guys, we came back here for a reason to honor God, not to live like horses patoot. And he's so distraught, he pulls his beard out with his bare hands. I mean, dude, that hurts, okay? Hurts. So for a lady to compare to that, I guess it'd be like, I guess a beard, it hurts more sensitive around your chin than your hair. And pull it out your thigh, I guess. Pull your hair out there. See that's not fun. So the reality is here. Later on, he says that also Herod, again, there is time, he wanted to expand the walls of Jerusalem. Some Jews thought that idea was fantastic because it would get back to the days of Solomon's glory. But then some Jews go, oh, I'm on to you, brother. You're doing that to collect more tax, you jerk. So some Jews, just like in Nehemiah's day, there was times of distress. Some were for and some were against. Just like in Herod's time, some were for and some were against. And for right reasons on both times. The ones against it in Nehemiah's day, not right reasons spiritually speaking, but right reasons in a worldly sense, in a human thinking sense. I can get where they're coming from in Nehemiah's day, going, dude, man, the last time we built the wall, look what happened. It got torn down and we got in captivity. Won't we just be free to live and let live, love and let love? Let's all just be one, with everybody else around us. You start building walls, people start thinking we're divisive. We think we're divisive, then they start wanting to attack us. They attack us, and we go to captivity again, man. I don't want to do that mess. And Nehemiah's like, dude, it's not about that. It's about just doing what God says. Take it one step at a time, all right? King Herod, he's like, hey, man, I expand the walls. People are like, oh, this is awesome. That's the Solomon's glory days. Yeah. Other Jews were like, dude, you do realize he's going to tax us, right? He's doing that to make you think he's loving us, but he's not loving on us. He's using that for the financial leverage to collect more tax from us. He's already bludgeoning us with taxes. It gives them a chance to do even more so. You do realize you give him a license to exploit you more. You know that, right? Under the pretense that he's giving you a handout. It comes with strings attached. And there was conflict there. Some were so blinded by the glory days of Solomon, they didn't see the practical exploitation of Herod's wicked ways. And so they were both in times of distress, and they both rebuilt. But by the way, that's what he's talking about right here. And this, by the way, this is your 62 weeks, both of these. So your 62 weeks, if you do the math of this, 62 weeks, what you have is 434 times 360 equals 156,240 days, which is divided by 365.25, which then equals 427 years, which by the way would then speak to 445 BC, which is when Nehemiah rebuilt the walls. He built the walls of Jerusalem. And then you have 18 BC, because that's 427 years. All of a sudden, now you have King Herod expanding the walls. Of Jerusalem. And then both in times of distress. And then what happens? He says here, and they did these times of distress. He built the wall, and then 462 weeks went by, which is 434 years, but into a Julian calendar it's 427, which brings you to 18 BC. And then afterwards, or after a time, well, that's coincidental. 18 BC to 2 BC, isn't too much after a time, is it? Oh, what a coincidence. Why is that important? Because why did God want to stop the 62 weeks at 18 BC? Because he wanted to tell you who the king was of the province from which Jesus, Yeshua, would be born. Herod died in 1 BC. That's coincidental that Jesus, Yeshua, was born in 2 BC? No, it's not coincidental. He wants to make sure you knew that the expansion of the walls in 18 BC, the same king who expanded the walls would be the same king over the province from which would be alive when Jesus, Yeshua, was born, who again tried to kill him, right before he died. Herod tried to kill all the babies, as you know. So that's what's going on with that. So that's right there, your 62 weeks here. Now, I can get to the more depth of this. As you can see, I'm running out of board and out of time. But there's more to this, obviously, a lot more. But I wanted you to on the board, I'm going to write again. So Christ was born later, or after a time under the rule of King Herod, who built walls of Jerusalem. Whoop. And died 1 BC. So here, well, whoop. I had to write this out differently. Oh, hello, come on. So Christ being born in 2 BC and Herod dying in 1 BC is crucial to know, because the reason why Daniel's prophecy of 62 weeks First of all, it makes sense. The 7 weeks speaks to the time which Daniel was living in, that Jeremiah, his compadre, and Ezekiel, his compadre, brothers in arms, would not be alive to see what he just saw. They already died. And here he is, and he sees, Zerubbabel will go back, he sees the first sign of the promises being fulfilled. And God goes, oh, it gets better. And later on, beyond your time, Daniel, I'm going to have everybody go back, rebuild the walls under Nehemiah in 445 BC. There'll be a building, an infinite tents. There'll be a building and an expansion. So here you have, I'll put expansion here instead of build, because he says it infinite tents. So you have here, he's 445 BC, Nehemiah builds the walls of Jerusalem. To 18 BC, later on, there's 427 years. 62 weeks goes by, and now you arrive at, what a coincidence, the rule of King Herod. What a coincidence, he's only the second time since Nehemiah that somebody's building and expanding walls of Jerusalem. What a coincidence, he's the same ruler from which the Messiah would be born. What a coincidence, the Messiah is born, Yeshua, in 2 BC, and this king, this ruler, dies a year after that. What a coincidence. And he's letting Daniel know, what's that? What, of war? Yeah. Yeah, well, he deserves it, eating from the inside out, jerk. So he killed all those babies. So this is the actual 62 weeks. It has nothing to do with Jesus' crucifixion. You go, but it says that in the scripture. I know, we're getting there. It doesn't, I'll show you. So here is the first part of understanding and knowing intimately, knowing the details about the dates in view are 586 to 538. That's your 7 weeks right there. That's your 7 weeks right here. The 7 weeks is right here. It's right there. That's your 48 years, which is actually is 49, but when you transliterate it into the Julian calendar, it's 48, which is right there. Oh, and then you say, where's 62 weeks? Well, that's actually 434 years, but when you do it into the Julian calendar, it's 427, and that equals 445 when they build an infinitely tents, expand the walls. That's from Nehemiah building the walls of Jerusalem to 18 BC, King Herod expanding the walls of Jerusalem, and both were in times of distress. What a coincidence. That's coincidence? I don't think so. Oh, and then the odd, furthermore, unto, these walls and expansions happens unto, or at a later time, then would be the Messiah, the Prince. He did come later on, didn't he? Yeah, 16 years later. Herod starts to build, and by the way, 18 BC starts to build the walls. People say 1918 BC. Well, 16 years later, Christ is born. What a coincidence that number 8 times 2. The resurrection is number 8. And 2 is the number of witness and testimony. He witnesses and testifies that he is the resurrection and the life. I think it's just profoundly interesting to me that unless you see what this word odd means, which means at a later time, you're not going to agree with what I just said. You're going to go, oh, that's crazy, that's malarkey, you land on 18 BC, that's got nothing to do with Christ's birth, it's got nothing to do with Christ's crucifixion, resurrection, this guy's off his rocker. No, I'm just telling you what the words mean. The word means furthermore at a later time, which would then fall into the mindset of what's being told to Daniel. He's giving Daniel just a time frame from which the Messiah would then come on the scene at a later time, right after the ongoing expansion and times of trouble would happen over this 427-year period. When that 427-year period is over, it's going to be ended, or during a time where they're expanding walls, and after a time after that, the Messiah would come. What a coincidence. He sure enough did. He came in 2 BC. So we're over time. We're going to end with that, because I'm going to go into some more of this review and go into more of this on next Sunday, because it deserves another lesson. It's too much information just to squeeze it into one session. Yes?
The just thing I realize that it doesn't have to do with this necessarily, but 62 weeks of years versus 62 weeks of months. Princess Diana lived 434 months. 62
Oh, I didn't know that.
Isn't that weird? I mean, that's...
That is weird. I didn't know that. Princess Diana lived 434 months?
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea.
36 years and 2 months is what she lived, which is 434 months. I've known that for a long time, but never connected it to the 62.
Okay.
62
Oh.
weeks of, I mean, it more or less points to her being
Really?
put away. An
Okay.
accident.
Well, we're going to see more in the later verses of chapter 9 in verse 26 and 27. We're going to tie in some things we talked about before about what happens in tribulation period. We're going to see the timeline of the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, the pale horse, kind of go back on that a little bit because it speaks to that a little bit, and kind of parlaying the end of Daniel with this part of Daniel with other things we've talked about in Daniel that we haven't spoke of recently, but we did a couple weeks ago. But there's a lot of different things that fall in here that can gel together when you see things for what they are. And it's just really, it's exciting to me to see it for what it is and to see the truth just kind of just unfold. Yes?
Vicky said, why is the street mentioned separately from the wall in verse 25? Is it considered part of the wall?
No. No, it's a great, you know why it says that? Because Romans were the ones that get the credit and history of building roads. Romans, that's why the famous phrasing, people say, I walked the Romans road, it leads them unto Christ in Romans 9 or throughout the book of Romans. The reality is that they get that phrasing from two things. The Romans book is a good book to talk about who Christ is, but they get it from the word Romans road because Romans were known in history as the one culture, the one kingdom that expanded roadways throughout the world. The known world. What's that? The APN way. They say all roads lead to Rome. Rome was the one who paved the way for roads. So when they say street, they mean literally the street of Jerusalem. But they mean he's talking about the emphasis of not just the streets of Jerusalem, but how later on, under Herod and other Roman rulers, they expanded all roads into Rome. And that would include throughout their province, throughout Judea and so forth. So it speaks to that. So it speaks to the streets and separate from the wall, absolutely. But it speaks to it in a small sense in Nehemiah's day and a stronger sense in Herod's day because of what Rome did in history. It's a fact. So good question. And we'll get into more of that also, more so when we continue on. I didn't cover everything, obviously. I wanted to get to certain points so we can get a good stopping point and get to the next part on next Sunday. Still a lot more to cover on this and reviewing to make sure we're good and then going forward and finishing out on next Sunday. So let's pray. We'll have ready for our communion. Again, to remind you, it is Communion Sunday. If you don't have your elements, you got to get your elements ready for it. Let's close and pray, and we'll segue into that part of our time. So, Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have together with you. We thank you for your love, your support, your continual guidance and insight you give us. We just pray and ask that you would be able to help us to in our disposition to know that we are sinners, that we have transgressed and we have rebelled, we've been insubordinate, we haven't listened to you. And we thank you that through all of that you love us. You forgive us. We ask you to forgive us. We acknowledge that we're sinners, and we ask you to continue to wash and cleanse us. And so we especially look now to the next part of our time together with you and honoring this time of remembrance of your Last Supper. So, Father, we thank you for this time and lesson in the book of Daniel. Continue to teach, educate. Help us to be collaborating with you, to have the knowledge there, to have the internal disposition be there. And then if we can be blessed by you, Father, to be called highly precious, greatly favored, greatly beloved. We were without words if we even have that ability to take the love you already know, that we know you have for us, that you tell us you have for us. If you would multiply that love upon us because of your discretion to do so, because of your will, your just determination, we would be benefactors of that, and it's greatly appreciative and thankful for it. So we're thankful for all you have done, continue to do, and yet will do. Be with us now in this time of, our remembrance of you. And just thank you so much. I ask all this in Jesus, Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay, so today, again, is our communion.